Hey, welcome back to our video discipleship series on fallen heroes, taking a look at people from the Old Testament and the New Testament that we rightfully so look up to as examples of faith and godliness and people who followed after the Lord, but also just like you and me, they had their flaws, they had their challenges, they had their sin, they had issues, they were fallen heroes. And so we've looked at Peter, we have looked at Joseph, we have a handful of others we're going to look at. Today is Abraham. Father Abraham is who we're looking at today. One of the most dominant figures in all of the Bible, one of the most dominant figures, of course, in the Old Testament. He is mentioned, Abraham is mentioned almost as much as Moses. He takes second place. Moses is mentioned more in the Old Testament than Abraham. Abraham comes in second, Abraham, and we meet him in Genesis. His story is recorded in Genesis. His whole life story is recorded for us. Genesis 11 to Genesis 25, those chapters contain the life of Abraham, and that's where we introduced to him. That's where we see God's covenant with him. That's when we see the things he goes through, his ups and his downs. And then finally in Genesis 25 is the record of his death. Abraham, that's our fallen hero for today. His original name was Abram, wasn't Abraham. It was Abram, which simply means high father, a high and exalted father. It is God who changes his name to Abraham, which means the father of many. And boy, he was the father of many. In fact, believers today, you and me, we're called the children of Abraham. So he had many descendants physically, but he certainly has many, many, many more descendants spiritually. I don't know about you, but when I was younger in VBS or Sunday school, we would sing that song, Father Abraham. Father Abraham had many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, so are you. So let's just praise the Lord. Remember that song? That's based upon our fallen hero, Abraham, who did indeed follow God, had a covenant with God, a faithful man, and yet had his ups and his downs. Perhaps the most famous thing people think about when they think about Abraham is his willingness to sacrifice Isaac when the Lord was testing his faith. Genesis chapter 22, very dramatic example of Abraham willing to take Isaac, his son, who most scholars think at that time was a teenager, what we'd call a teenager, not some 2, 3, 4-year-old, was a young man willing to sacrifice him on Mount Moriah. Maybe you remember the story. He's just ready to do it, has his hand raised, and the angel of the Lord stops him, Abraham, and stops him and provides a ram in the thicket. So that's probably his most famous Old Testament story is the willingness to sacrifice Isaac. And we see in there a picture, a type, a shadow of the willingness of God the Father to sacrifice his son for you and me. He also has that epic show of compassion when he's visited by angels and they're going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and he intercedes on behalf of Sodom. Of course, his relative Lot lives there, but he intercedes and he has this bargain with the angel of the Lord. If 50 people are there that are righteous and not guilty, will you spare them? Yes, I will. If 45, if 30, and he actually works his way down to 10, like that countdown of compassion. If you find 10 people in Sodom, please spare it. And of course, the Lord doesn't find 10, and Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed. Lot does escape, his relative Lot does, and maybe Lot is a video for another time. Indeed, he himself is a fallen hero. Abraham appears to have been born near ancient Babylon, Ur. He travels with his father, Terah, to Haran, which is a place in between what we would call like the Promised Land and Babylon. So in the Middle East, he's there, and there's where the Lord calls him out. It's that great calling of Abram out of his country into a place he doesn't know. In fact, the scriptures say it like this in Genesis 12, 1, 2, and 3. The Lord said to Abram, leave your country, your people, your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you. That's the covenant God made with Abraham, that he would be the vehicle, the individual who God will use to bring blessings to the whole world, all the nations. And of course, Jesus came from the lineage of Abraham, the Hebrews, the Jews. So that's the covenant. And then a couple of chapters later, God says to Abram again in Genesis 15:5, he makes his covenant even more clear to him, and he brought him outside and he says, look to the heaven and number the stars if you're able to number them. Then he said, so shall your offspring be. And here's this famous verse, Genesis 15:6. This verse is why he's called the father of faith. And he believed the Lord. So Abraham believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. And that's where we get the idea that people are counted righteous by faith, not by works. And Paul, the Apostle Paul, you know this, he expands upon this concept in the New Testament, particularly in the book of Romans, that we are justified by faith, not by our works, and as was Abraham. So God promises that he's going to have some offspring as numerable as the stars above, and he believes him. He does have his moments of doubt. He laughs about it. His wife laughs about it. God does bless them in their old age, 90 and 100. Sarah is 90 and Abraham's 100 when they finally have Isaac, the promised child from God. He does have Isaac in their old age. Isaac means laughter. And that's what Abraham and Sarah both did. And so he lives his life, and then we read in Genesis 25 that these are the days of Abraham's life, 175 years. That's how long he lived. Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man, full of years, and was gathered to his people. James, in the New Testament, the book of James, he refers to Abraham as God's friend, and he was. A hero for sure, but not without his flaws. We already know that the only hero in the scriptures without flaws is Jesus Christ. So Abraham, we know at least on 2 occasions, maybe you don't know this, but on 2 occasions, he lied. He was dishonest about his relationship with Sarah, his wife. He did it to protect himself when he went into foreign lands, when maybe his life was in danger because Sarah was a beautiful woman and he was afraid someone would kill him and take her. So he's deceitful about it. So there's 2 occasions where he is deceitful. That's Genesis 12 and Genesis 20. And then maybe the biggest flaw of all is when he agrees in Genesis chapter 16. He agrees with his wife when she says, we haven't had any children. We need to have a child that I can raise. Here is my servant Hagar. So I suggest you go sleep with her, and then maybe through her we can have a child. And Abraham, in a moment, of course, of weakness, says, what a great idea, and he does. And so out of Abraham and Hagar comes Ishmael, and there's conflict because Ishmael's not the promised son. Isaac is, and Isaac comes later. They were impatient. The sin behind the sin for Abraham and Sarah was impatience. They were impatient to wait for the promise of God, and so they thought they could work it out with Hagar and work it out with their intervention. And of course, it's a disaster. Hagar and Sarah, major conflict. Isaac and Ishmael, major conflict that actually to this day, their descendants are still in conflict. In the Middle East, a lot of the conflict is there because of Abraham's great sin. So there's to this day consequences of Sarah and Abraham being impatient, and Hagar and Ishmael and all that happened. He has his moments of doubts, but he also has stunning moments of obedience. Do you know, think about this for a minute, do you know that he was 99 years old when he was circumcised? Think about that. 99 years old when he was circumcised. That's some serious obedience. He listened to God. He obeyed God. Yes, when he messed up big. But when he followed the Lord, major nation-shattering things happened as God uses this man Abraham to bring about his redemptive purposes to the world. I mean, the Old Testament calls God over and over again the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So his name, Abraham, is attached to God because this great man of God was so faithful. He listened to God, he obeyed God, he believed God, and has thus earned, rightfully so, the title, the father of all who believe. God used Abraham greatly. He is an example to us of faith. He's an example to us of hope in the promises of God. When I read about Abraham in the Bible, when I read about his ups and his downs, when I read about his family, and I read about the messes that he has, and also the tremendous spiritual victories that this man has as he journeyed through the promised land, believing God, stumbling along the way, just like you and I do. When I read about him, I'm reminded of that saying, I've heard it many times, that God uses imperfect people to accomplish his will. God uses imperfect people to accomplish his will because that's the only kind of people there are. So I'm grateful for Abraham. I'm grateful for his example. I'm grateful that God uses people like Abraham, like Peter, like David, like Joseph, like you, and thankfully, he even uses me. This is the conclusion of our study on Abraham. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to take a look at someone again in the New Testament, Mary Magdalene. So we'll take a look at her and her story and what we see in the scriptures about yet another fallen hero. Catch you next time.